Look at this man. This man has committed multiversal war crimes and owns a living chicken nugget and has crossed paths and is rivals with some of the most influential memes in the multiverse. This man is a Macho Perez. Hello, I'm Complex Lib, and today I'll be explaining Fancy Turkey's Macho Cinematic Universe. Only OGs will remember when this guy's name was Fancy Turkey Films and made random edits all the time. So basically, this guy only has like 65,000 subs, but he's created this entire alternate universe where you mix Star Wars, Marvel, Despicable Me, and a few others, and you get this weird series. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be analyzing every single one of his videos that actually have relevance to the story. And if they don't, I'm just going to skip it over. So I'm going to analyze them, and then later I'm going to be turning them into a final timeline and explaining what in the world's going to happen. Most of you guys do not know what I'm going to be discussing, but hey. Oh man, sorry, wait. Bro, I cannot speak today. That should do it. Sometimes you just need some water to speak. Alright, let's begin. So first we got the video Boba versus Vector. Boba hunts down and beats Vector in a spaceship battle, and we don't really get much about that. This is his first official video that he has kept up. I don't remember what his very first video was. Next is Gru steals the Death Star. While the rebels are defending Scarif from Rogue One, Gru uses his rocket to shrink and steal the Death Star, which angers Darth Vader. Vader then goes on the rampage through the hallway from Rogue One. Napoleon Jedi Dynamite. It happens with this. In this universe, Napoleon Dynamite, yes, there we go, is the son of Darth Vader, and he was trained by Obi-Wan, and not much is known about that. He has an unknown sister, and in this universe, perhaps Luke doesn't exist and is replaced in this universe by Napoleon Dynamite. His sister is most likely Leia. He then cuts off Vader's hand, ending their Jedi duel. And then the next video, which I think is one of my favorites, is Skipper Annoys Mando. Despite working alone, Mando gets a crew to help him with his mission for some unknown reason. Unfortunately for Mando, his crewmates are a bunch of penguins. You will know them as Skipper, Kowalski, Rico, in private. Skipper tells Rico to dibble him, with Rico puking out a bag of cheesy dibbles for Skipper. Mando then tells them that he can bring them in warm or cold, with Skipper chomping very loudly, annoying Mando. He then tells Skipper that Bo-Katan sent him, with Skipper being suspicious, asking his name. Eventually, Skipper asks Mando if his accent is Dutch instead of Oh, there goes my dog. Anyway, eventually Skipper asks Mando if his accent is Dutch instead of allowing for Mando to tell him his backstory, which ends with Mando giving up on communicating with this flightless bird. Mr. Incredible finds Order 66. Mr. Incredible finds out Order 66, but just before it is commanded. We see many Jedi registered as being killed by clones. Obi-Wan and Cal Kestis are registered as killed, meaning Fallen Order hasn't happened yet. In about an hour, the Order goes out. But wait, that doesn't make sense. So how can the Jedi be deemed killed in the Order if the Order hasn't happened yet? Well, there's actually one of two things that happened. One, it's either an hour before it goes public and it just coincidentally just looks at all the Jedi tactics and see if they survive or not. Or the most likely solution is it was set up to make Mr. Incredible think it hasn't happened yet, but unfortunately already has. And everyone's favorite Jedi, Randall, has joined the dark side, is now known as Darth Randall, supposedly. Darth Randall kills Qui-Gon, but is then killed by Obi-Wan, but he's cut in half, and just like we saw for Maul, he survived. There's a small chance Randall is still alive. And Starkiller Base destroys Swallow Falls. This video takes place when Force Awakens happens, and Starkiller Base destroys Swallow Falls, and probably more worlds. This also shows that either Swallow Falls is on a separate world, or it's part of another Earth, since we see Earth later, again, much later. And Grogu Gru takes care of Grogu instead of Mando taking care of him. Grogu is playing the rigged carnival game from Despicable Me 1, and as we know, the game is rigged. Instead of a spaceship to knock down, it's the Death Star. And since the Death Star is shown as the object to destroy in this game, might mean that the Death Star has already been destroyed, most likely having this video take place after Return of the Jedi. Or we only pretty much see like one Death Star in this whole thing, so perhaps like once the one Death Star gets destroyed, I don't know. So basically it's right when the Mandalorian takes place. Long story short, Gru shoots a small Death Star, making Grogu happy. In the video, don't say it, Falcon trains or is friends with Officer Earl. This shows that Falcon and the Winter Soldier takes place before Swallow Falls is destroyed, with Officer Earl still on it when it was destroyed. In Sully vs. Vader, while Vader kills the rebels in the hallway, Sully escapes with Boo, indicating Boo may be a Force-sensitive child Vader wants, but ends up failing since the rebels and her escape. In the video, Mando adopts Poe. Poe is apparently a 50-year-old baby, and instead of getting Grogu, Mando gets Poe, and IG-11 tries to kill Poe, but as we know, Mando kills IG-11 before he gets a chance. And then we have Phil Swift versus Godzilla. Flex tape is so powerful, it made Phil Swift a kaiju, and now he must kill Godzilla. This is not part of the lore, but it's an epic movie trailer that I will definitely want to see. In Mr. Incredible vs. Anakin Skywalker, the Mustafar battle happens, and when Mr. Incredible has the high ground, Mr. Incredible punches Anakin's legs off when Anakin tries to flip over to him. In the Bad Batch with Russell joins the Bad Batch instead of Omega, but for some reason Fancy Turkey deleted the video while I was researching it, sadly. So I don't have the videos for this. But the video I do have is the Bad Hatch, which is where the Penguins joined the Bad Batch. Perhaps this is why the Penguins were recruited with Mando much later, is because they're well-known mercenaries. That is also when the Bad Batch has Omega, indicating the thing with Russell was short-lived, or this was before Russell joined them. In Boba vs. Vector 2, somehow Vector survived the last encounter with Boba Fett, and Vector kidnaps Gru's girls. After Boba kills Vector's shark and infiltrates his facility, Vector retreats into his ship with the Gorals in it. Boba then activates his jetpack missile and shoots Vector's ship down. But don't worry, the Gorals are okay. In a blink and you'll miss it shot, Gru's ship comes by Vector's shuttle, and we see later that he's got the Gorals out before Boba blew the shuttle up. We then see Vector make it out of the shuttle before it blows up, and Vector activates his flight suit, but gets electrocuted by a power line and falls off of it. But since he survived that injury in Despicable Me, he most likely survived it this time too. In The Good, the Cad, and the Ugly, Cad Bane was shown to have had a cameo in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, to which he was involved in a shootout and survived. This is also not part of the lore, but come on, this is a cool shot, let's admit it. We all wanted Cad Bane to be in a Western, well here you go. In Megamind vs. Thanos, the endgame battle is starting. But where are the other heroes who come out of the portals to fight Thanos? It seems that the Avengers don't actually need them, because Megamind is here. He tells Thanos he may be a villain, but just not a super one, which both angers and confuses Thanos. And Thanos rushes Megamind, to which Megamind uses nanobots which form the giant head to eat him, ending the endgame battle. Woo! In the Maguire-Lorian, Peter Parker is revealed to be the Mandalorian. Well, at least one of the Mandalorians, since Mando obviously acts a lot more different than the Maguire-Lorian. Also, the real Mando doesn't have Grogu in this universe. He has Poe. But Moff Gideon still somehow captured Grogu, probably from Gru, I guess. I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know at this point. I'm guessing this is in the same universe with Gru. Let's just assume that it was from Gru. Anyway, Boy Maguire arrives to get Grogu from Moff Gideon, but Moff Gideon attacks him, but ultimately ends with Maguire disarming Gideon, sparing his life. In Woody and Buzz Destroy the Death Star, Woody and Buzz are flying in space to go destroy the Death Star with the help from the Rebel Alliance. However, Vader finds them and tries to knock them out of space, but Buzz fires his laser at them, destroying 2 TIE fighters and knocking Vader out of orbit. Woody and Buzz then go into the exhaust port, blowing up the Death Star. We then see Buzz go flying into space, surviving the encounter, but there's no sign of Woody. It seems like since Buzz is made from plastic, his material saved him, but the fabric Woody was made of could not save him. Rip Woody. We all had a friend in him. In Monsters Inc., but Star Wars, when Mike and Sully get banished, they're banished on Hoth. Mike then fights Sully for getting them banished, but they stop fighting when they see AT-ATs right behind them, which shoots them, killing them. Then the Battle of Hoth happens. Buzz Lightyear destroys Thanos is another interesting video. In the endgame battle, when Thanos is bombing the Avengers, his ship suddenly starts firing at something in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Buzz Lightyear! Buzz then flies from the depths of space into Thanos' ship, completely catching Thanos off guard. And then we get Gru versus Megamind, which for some unknown reason Megamind decides to kidnap Margot, Edith, and Agnes. A very unique hostage situation, I'm sure. Gru gets to Megamind's lair, to which Megamind greets him and tells Minion to launch the Death Ray. Sorry, I was thinking the Minions from Despicable Me. No, he tells his Minion to launch the Death Ray. Gru then proceeds to get hit with the Death Ray. Even though it is shown he survives, Minion tells Megamind that he did it. Even though he didn't kill him, Megamind states that he now rules Metro City. Then there's Yondu in The Mandalorian. Apparently the Empire has been following Yondu for a very long time. A fleet of troopers come out of a transport, finding Yondu and bomb rushing him. But unfortunately for them, Yondu came prepared. Yondu used his arrow to wipe out about 12 troopers. I don't know, I'm not James A. Janice. This is when they realize it would be a good idea if they run, to which they do. But then Yondu blows up their transport with his arrow. And then there's Hulk versus Patrick. Patrick Star has been deemed an Avengers level threat for destroying Bikini Bottom on many occasions and being responsible as voicing Sans from Undertale, the most determined creature in the underworld. Upon knowing this, Hulk beats Patrick silly and ends with the Avengers locking this parasite in a jail cell in the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. And then there's Vector in the Rogue One hallway scene, which is when Vader was slaughtering the rebels. Vector was walking around, somehow oblivious to the fact that these boys were being slaughtered. Vector then leaves the scene eating a cookie. It's unknown if the Death Star battle plans got on, but since the Death Star was destroyed later, it will make sense that they were delivered. And then there's Gru in the Mandalorian hallway scene. After Moff Gideon took Grogu, Gru comes back for him, to which he's presented by an army of death troopers. But Gru's trusty freeze ray seems to do the job of decommissioning the bots. Mando then says goodbye to Grogu, and Gru takes Grogu back. Then there's Kevin from Home Alone Star Wars, which during the Rogue One final battle on Scarif, Kevin is here for some reason. And while the troopers try to interrogate Bodhi, Kevin shoots one of the troopers, laying the first shot of the battle. Then there's Knuckles versus Thanos, and honestly this one confuses me. Replacing Thor, Knuckles knocks Thanos to the ground, and Thanos proceeds to snap, but before he goes fully through with it, Knuckles stops him and proceeds to seemingly kill Thanos. But this isn't true, because we see Thanos being killed much later, but even though it isn't shown, it's assumed that the snap actually did happen, so Knuckles most likely just knocked out Thanos, but it's unknown if Thanos fulfilled the snap or not. And there's also Buddy the Elf versus Darth Vader, which all we learned is Buddy is Vader's son apparently. Then there's Sonic and Encanto. Sonic is apparently responsible for destroying the Madrigal house. Even though we see a glimpse of Sonic Boom Eggman, he doesn't exist in this universe, or at least doesn't appear. Dr. Eggman in Endgame is where Eggman is stranded in space from an unknown event but comes back to Earth. And then we follow this video from Dr. Eggman versus Thanos, which after the Avengers find Thanos in his garden at the beginning of Endgame, Eggman gives Thanos 5 seconds to tell them where the Infinity Stones are. After the 5 seconds, Thor cuts off Thanos' head with a Robotnik screaming. There's also Green Goblin in The Mandalorian, which it's shown the Green Goblin does or once worked with the Mandalorian and got them out of some sticky situations. And so then we get on to Sonic versus the Winter Soldier, where Bucky and Sonic meet for the first time, but Bucky shoots the car Sonic is standing in front of, which explodes and knocks out Sonic. But we see Sonic again in Sonic vs. Iron Man, where Iron Man shoots Sonic with a rocket, but Sonic grabs it and throws it back, knocking out Tony from the sky. There's also Knuckles versus Thor, where Thor throws Mjolnir at Knuckles, but Knuckles catches it and breaks it. And then there's Eggman versus Iron Man, where Eggman is asking if Iron Man can call a truce with him, to which Iron Man denies, shoots a rocket at Eggman's robot, and the robot goes tumbling to the ground. We also see General Grievous in Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness, where apparently Grievous is a member of the Illuminati. The best cameo from Multiverse of Madness, I'm sure. There's also Vector destroys Professor X. Professor X tries to rescue Gru by going into his mind, but he's too late. For while he's in Gru's mind, Gru gets dragged off by an unknown figure, and Vector most likely kills Professor X. And then there's Meet the Smartest Man Alive, where apparently in one universe, the Illuminati is made up of Carl Weezer, Balthazar Bratt, and Megamind. Oh, there's also Robotnik, showing here that he helped defeat Thanos, then he became a member of the Illuminati for that. But since this is a different universe, unlike the one we'll see later, that is why Robotnik doesn't appear in the Macho Cinematic Universe arc, because he's in a different reality. There's also Kenobi finds Shadow the Hedgehog, where Kenobi is on the run from most likely the Empire, but discovers Shadow being experimented on underneath the Imperial Fortress. Or this could tie into El Macho much later. Who knows? Then there's Sonic destroys Thanos. Despite what the title suggests, actually Sonic doesn't kill Thanos himself, but just destroys one of the ships, but this shows Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails were present in the endgame battle. There's Gru meets Arthur Morgan, is where Gru is taking Kyle for a walk when a wild Arthur Morgan appears. He tells Gru he owes him some money, where Gru tries freezing him, but Arthur Morgan shoots Gru. But we will see later that somehow Gru recovered. Arthur Morgan could be a bounty hunter working for El Macho, or as he said, he may just be a score to settle among old enemies. El Macho destroys the Illuminati, where the actual timeline of the Macho Cinematic Universe starts to come into play. Going on a path of evil, El Macho uses his chicken, his chest tattoos, and his thick booty to beat all 4 members of the Illuminati, murdering them in the name of salsa. And then there's El Macho joins the Avengers, where things get very, very interesting. We see that Macho is starting out as a good guy. Surprisingly, he actually started out a good guy, or maybe he was faking it. So apparently he was actually friends with both Gru and the Avengers. Macho apparently has the strength to stop an entire army worth of aliens and rides his flying homicidal shark into space, blowing up the motherboard that caused the Chitauri invasion of New York. He seems like a cool guy. Apparently Dr. Nefario actually met Darth Vader. In this universe, Dr. Nefario is head of operations for the Death Star, telling Vader for years they have worked on it together, but ever since Vader started chasing Kenobi, it's just become a major distraction. Vader then tells Nefario that Kenobi is the only thing that matters now, and Nefario accepts it, not wanting to die to Vader. We then see Vader again. We then see Vector again, for no reason. Then, when Anakin discovers El Macho is a Sith Lord, Anakin is talking with El Macho, saying that there is something about the Force that is being kept from him. This is when Macho spills the beans and tells him he is a Sith Lord, to which Anakin says he will turn him over to the Council, but also being interested in joining him. Then we see El Macho actually executes Order 66, where Macho puts out the order to all troopers that it's time to execute Order 66. We then see a montage of the troopers turning on their brethren. Some include Mr. Lockwood and War Machine. Buzz Lightyear was also shot, but somehow survived. Gru then comes by Coruscant and asks the troopers what's going on, to which they tell him there's a rebellion and he should lead, prompting Gru to do so, eventually realizing El Macho, his former friend, was behind this all along. We also see El Macho versus Homelander as well. El Macho stops by to see Homelander, one of the boys, but is shocked by the sight of a chicken nugget. Realizing that his pet chicken, Macho proceeds to fight a Homelander with some very unique tactics, but inevitably ends with him stabbing Homelander in the ear with a knife. So apparently Homelander likes chicken nuggets, and you'll see later why he turned Macho's chicken into a chicken nugget. Then we see El Macho versus Kronk. There was one previous episode where Kronk helped recruit the natives from Avatar to possibly help fight El Macho, but we'll see later he technically works for Macho, so perhaps he's just sightseeing or something, but nothing very out of place happens in the lore. Basically, Kronk and Pacho save Pandora. But as far as this video goes, Kronk prepares a dinner for Macho and Dr. Nefario, and they're in the middle of forming one of those purple maniac minions, and Kronk gives Macho a vial filled with poison for Kuzco. Kuzco's poison. And since Kuzco is the Emperor of Emperor's New Groove, since we never see Palpatine, it can be assumed that Kuzco is the Emperor of the multiverse and that Macho wants to kill Kuzco so he can take over. I know it's a stretch, but at least it makes sense. Also, when I said you don't see Palpatine as much, you see him in that Napoleon Jedi Knight video, but besides that, Palpatine shows up literally never. Oh, also Vector is here for some weird reason. After thinking this over, Kronk wants no part in this. In exchange for his failure, Macho drops Kronk down a trapdoor, leaving his fate unknown. Then we see El Macho versus the Predator, which Predator surprisingly puts up a good fight. And we also see Macho still has his chicken, showing the Homelander thing probably hasn't happened yet. Eventually, he beats Predator and Predator blows up with Vector's voice line echoing in the background. Then we see Lord Shen versus Obi-Wan, where Padme confronts Lord Shen that Obi-Wan was right about something. We don't know what that thing was. I'm guessing Shen worked with Macho or is another foe of Obi-Wan's, which is score to settle, I don't know. Shen then kills Padme, and Obi-Wan fights Shen. This is the most climactic battle since the Clone Wars finale, realizing that I didn't say Rise of Skywalker because that movie sucks. The battle ends with Obi-Wan having the high ground, but Shen throws a knife at Obi-Wan, but since we see him much later, it's assumed he survived. Then we see El Macho versus Master Shifu. At some time, Shifu taught El Macho the fighting style of salsa, which grew El Macho to have his own restaurant, and use some very abstract moves to fight his opponents. Macho fights Shifu and ultimately defeats Shifu. Shifu then shows Macho the trick of the dramatic exit, to which he tricks Macho to look somewhere else while Shifu walks off. And Macho then gives up on trying to find Shifu. While Shifu is meditating later, we see El Macho forgot his chicken, which Shifu most likely sent to Homelander to interrogate the chicken. But, growing impatient, Homelander turns him into a chicken nugget. Okay, now here's, I think, my favorite Fancy Turkey video. So, there's Grug versus Megamind. Yes, that's an actual video he made. Megamind meets Grug, to which he hates Megamind for some unknown reason. Perhaps because he witnessed him trying to kill his friend Gru or something, but also because he hates Megamind's high-tech ideas. Anyway, Grug chases Megamind all over town until a copper ball falls on him. This is when Grug gets the ball off of him and runs it into Megamind. It's currently unknown if Megamind survived or not. And then there's Syndrome versus Yoda, which we're getting very close in the timeline, so brace for it. Yoda gets to the Emperor's office where Syndrome is waiting. Yoda calls him the Emperor, which could mean that El Macho was posing as the Emperor, but the most likely reason is that Kuzco was the past Emperor, but Kuzco was poisoned. And since Syndrome's company helped create the Omni droids and all the destructive robots that they've been observing, Yoda thinks that Syndrome is the actual Emperor, and Macho probably staged that, showing how no one caught on he was a Sith Lord at this time. So technically it could make some sense. Meanwhile, Frozone is trying to find his super suit to go into battle, which he cannot find. Syndrome almost kills Yoda a few times, but ultimately Syndrome throws one of the Senate seats at Yoda, which Yoda catches with the Force and throws the seat back at Syndrome, killing him, leaving Yoda victorious. Oh, also, Jack Sparrow was apparently in Rogue One. Yeah, so along with Kevin, they both fought in the Battle of Scarif, most likely winning it. Then there's Puss in Boots in Avengers Endgame. We learned that off on the sides, Puss in Boots and Humpty are trying to get the Soul Stone, with Puss holding on to Humpty by a rope since they're both hanging off the side of the Soul Mountain. Eventually, Puss has to let Humpty go, and Puss in Boots is shot by what he saw, via Humpty Dumpty's having a great fall. Puss ends up getting the Soul Stone, which means Puss must have been helping the Avengers get the Soul Stone to bring everyone back, or something like that, I don't know. Now, we get to the final video. Guys, I'm sorry if I'm talking so quick. It's just I've laid this off for a whole week, and really I want to record this so I can edit this so then I can get through by March 25th, I believe, a day after my birthday. So this thing is going to be hard to record in time, but let's see if you guys like it. So we got El Macho versus everybody. So after Mr. Incredible discovered Order 66 and defeated Anakin, he was captured by El Macho. Meanwhile, Mando found Poe as a baby and raised him. Meanwhile, Mando found Poe as a baby and raised him to be an ultimate warrior. Gru worked with the Republic and raised Grogu. Shrek became the channel Shrek Reacts, and Grug defeated Megamind in a one-on-one fight. Macho also killed the Illuminati, which Grievous was the only one to survive. Back to present day, Macho launches the Omni Droid to attack the city. While Macho leaves to the city, Yoda comes by and frees Mr. Incredible. The Avengers, Shrek, Gru, Poe, Frozen, Elastigirl, and Grug devise a plan to stop him when Mr. Incredible returns and the plan is in session. Now, Mach Ultimo shall begin. They all go to the city to face off with the droid, which ends with Grug being shot and crushed, and Thor launching his hammer into the droid, destroying it. El Macho decides to drink the potion from Despicable Me 2 and tries to kill the group, but ends with Thor electrocuting him and Indiana Jones shooting him dead. But it turns out he faked his death, to Shrek's annoyance. That is when Macho outnumbers them with power, and Poe whooshy fingers to hold Macho to the spirit realm. It ends with Shrek being sad for the loss of Poe, and Obi-Wan telling him, "May the Force be with you," and the final shot being of a Doctor Strange portal opening up to the Jade Palace. Perhaps a tie to Shifu in the Furious 5 will help bring Poe back, as in Kung Fu Panda 3. You know, they had something really similar to that. But one key detail I forgot to mention was that in one scene we see El Macho's chicken, which, I'll remind you, is a chicken nugget right now. But most likely Macho just got another chicken, or maybe Homelander did not cook the chicken, Macho just assumed stuff. But since Macho doesn't bring up his chicken in the Homelander fight, I'm guessing the chicken's dead, this is a new chicken. I'm just gonna assume that though. Okay, now we got our final timeline to do, fellas. Let's do this. It's a little difficult to tell which events happened first, but we know for a fact that things like the Illuminati being formed, Macho being trained by Shifu, and Macho joining the Avengers are first in the timeline, since this establishes who the Illuminati is, and also shows that Macho was once a good guy before turning evil, also learning where he learned his moves, and since him joining the Avengers is the only time we see him good, that means that this takes place first. Also, when we see Sonic, Knuckles, and Robotnik, this is simply just another universe due to several key details. Detail number 1, Robotnik is part of the Illuminati, but we see later the Illuminati Macho fights are the ones from Multiverse of Madness, and Megamind and Carl Weezer are a part of this Illuminati, now confirming this is a different reality with a different Illuminati. Detail number 2, the lore just does not add up. Knuckles seems to destroy Thor's hammer later, but Thor uses the hammer during the final fight of El Macho, and we see that the hammer isn't shattered when fighting Macho, which could be that Knuckles fought Thor afterwards, but there will be no reason to, and also the only way this timeline would work in the Macho timeline is if all this happened in between the scenes, but we really don't get any clear understanding of how this works. But it doesn't really matter anyway, since it literally has no ties into the Macho subplot. So I'll leave this up to debate because I'm actually stumped on this. And I'm going insane in this video, by the way. And also detail number 3. In Sonic and Encanto, we see a glimpse of Eggman from Sonic Boom, which this confirms there are probably 2 Eggmans. So in this universe, Sonic Boom Eggman is movie Sonic supposed rival, so that could mean that Robotnik is part of our universe but just went to another reality. But as far as the actual lore goes, of what I know for certain is this universe's Infinity War does happen, and Thanos most likely does snap. After the snap, Endgame occurs, while the Star Wars prequels era occurs at roughly the same time. This is also after Macho helped the Avengers, and since he stopped an entire alien invasion, basically by himself, he was elected Chancellor instead of Palpatine. Palpatine does exist in this universe since we see him in the earlier video, Napoleon Dynamite. Dynamite. I swear I can't say this name. After Macho is made Chancellor, he starts learning the dark side of the salsa. Also, Hulk and Iron Man find the cause of this alien invasion to be none other than the sociopathic criminal Patrick Star, to which they contain in a gel cell on the SHIELD helicarrier. During this time, Endgame is most likely the Great War of the prequels, instead against the droid army. Since we don't see any droids, as well really strengthens my point. The only droid we see is Grievous, who is actually a cyborg, and later becomes a member of our universe's Illuminati. Now, I want to see the theatrical cut to where we actually see Grievous talking with Doctor Strange. Basically, Endgame has the Avengers, Buzz Lightyear, and Megamind all fighting Thanos, and Megamind eating Thanos, ending the battle in victory. A little while before the battle, Puss in Boots got the Soul Stone for the gauntlet, resulting in Humpty Dumpty dying, and Movie Robotnik might have helped kill Infinity War Thanos, but I can't be that certain, sadly. After the battle, Megamind captures Gru's Gorals to kill Gru, and even though Megamind fires a laser at Gru from the actual sun, he somehow survives, but Minion tells Megamind he did kill him, possibly to save Gru's life. Don't worry, this action will haunt Megamind later. The reason I am mentioning this now is because there sadly isn't a way to determine when this takes place. Sometime later, Anakin, who is possibly being trained by Obi-Wan, rebels against the Jedi and goes to El Macho, to which he discovers he's a Salsa Sith Lord, a sauce. Anakin then goes on his path to become Darth Salsa. I don't care if his name's Darth Vader, this should just be his canon name. I'm just going to say this just to mess with all you guys. I'm just going to call him Darth Salsa for the rest of this video. A little while before this, Macho recruits Dr. Nefario and Kronk to poison and kill Emperor Kuzco, the supposed emperor of the multiverse. And Kronk gives Macho the poison, but directly afterwards, Kronk regrets his decision and tries to back out of this evil plan, to which Macho responds by opening a trapdoor on Kronk, leaving his fate unknown. At this time, El Macho realizes he is going to be discovered soon, so he has to think of a plan to escape fast. Simultaneously, Mr. Incredible finds the secret plan 466, which he will figure out soon that is too late. Since El Macho uses Syndrome technology multiple times, he calls in a favor of Syndrome to attack Yoda, while he executes Order 66. El Macho launches the order, to which multiversal heroes such as War Machine and Flint Lockwood's dad are sadly shot and killed by troopers. The troopers shoot Buzz Lightyear, but we'll soon discover that he survives. Gru then comes up to see some troopers and asks what's going on, and the troopers tell him the heroes rebelled, leaving Gru speechless and eventually leaving Coruscant. Simultaneously, later in the present, Yoda discovers Syndrome, believing him to be the Emperor, and fights for a while, ending with Yoda launching a Senate seat at Syndrome, killing him. At this point, Macho escapes to a secret base. After Anakin becomes corrupted, he fights Mr. Incredible, who after a while Mr. Incredible punches his actual legs off. Anakin then gets put in the Darth Salsa suit and embarks on many fiestas. Darth Salsa is working on the Death Star with El Macho and Dr. Nefario, and that is when Obi-Wan, one of Anakin's old rivals, comes into play. Obi-Wan discovers Shadow the Hedgehog, which Macho is experimenting on. As I've demonstrated earlier, Sonic is in a different universe, but Robotnik was from this universe, which means Shadow may be in this universe. However, Darth Salsa decides to hunt down Obi-Wan instead of working the Death Star, much to Dr. Nefario's disappointment. Man, I'm losing my mind. Later we see in Obi-Wan's POV he meets an old rival of his, Lord Shen, who kills Padme right in front of him, bites him, then stabs him, even though we'll see Obi-Wan somehow survive that. After this whole Obi-Wan fiasco, Salsa either gives up or fails to kill Obi-Wan, but the Empire decides to continue building the Death Star. That is when the Battle Scarif happens, and Kevin from Home Alone, Jack Sparrow, helped the rebels get the Death Star plans, but Simultaneously, Gru sneaks over to the Death Star and shrinks it down, leaving the rebels victorious. However, it isn't over. Darth Salsa decides to head on over to where the plans are being transferred, and Agents Sully and Boo are on the ship and escape from Salsa, which Vector was just walking through the ship for some reason. It doesn't end well for Sully, however, because later in the Battle of Hoth, Sully and Mike both die. Sometime soon, the Empire orders bounty hunter Arthur Morgan to find Gru and execute him, which surprisingly he successfully does. He shoots Gru and presumably gets the Death Star back for the Empire. But we see later Gru also survives. The Empire is now running the Death Star again. But thankfully the rebels got the Death Star plan because they sent out their best man, Buzz Lightyear, who joined the rebels, and Woody, Buzz's friend, to blow up the space station thing. They both fly into the exhaust port, to which the Death Star blows up with Buzz gang launched into space, but sadly no sign of Woody. Rip Woody. Sometime around this time, El Macho decides to fight some people. He starts by going head to head with the Illuminati, with him and his chicken killing them with special moves, all except Grievous, who escaped as always. We then move on to give Shifu a little visit, beating him in battle, but that is when Shifu pulls out his special move, the dramatic exit. He divides Macho's attention to something in the palace, which he tells him to look at, and Shifu takes the opportunity to escape. Later, he's meditating and finds Macho left his chicken, which coincidentally Shifu is friends with Homelander and sends the chicken to him to interrogate it. It doesn't work and Homelander turns him into a chicken nugget, which later Macho discovers and starts to fight Homelander, concluding the fight by stabbing Homelander in the head. Macho also fought and killed Predator, who gave a surprisingly good fight. After a few more fights and deaths, Darth Salsa realizes he has two children, Buddy the Elf and Napoleon Dynamite, who both sadly suck, but we see later that somehow Buddy escaped and Napoleon basically kills Salsa. Also we hear he has an unknown sister, or the word Salsa has an unknown daughter, which could be Leia, I don't know. Remember when I said that when Megamind tried to kill Gru, he would have consequences? That is when Grug finds Megamind, chases him through town square, ending with him crushing Megamind with a big copper ball. After this entire arc, the Mandalorian comes into play, but instead of getting Grogu, he finds Poe, which Mando keeps and takes with him across the galaxy. As for Grogu, it's revealed that Gru is alive and he finds Grogu and takes care of him, but later finds out Grogu was kidnapped by Moff Gideon. He also meets another Mandalorian who is the cool dude, Bully Maguire, who helps capture Moff Gideon, or maybe it's the same guy, but I don't believe so. After some time, Gru finds Grogu, who the Mandalorian helped take back from Gideon, to which he gives to Grogu. No, he gives to Gru, actually. I don't know what, yeah, Grogu got given to Grogu. Yeah, that definitely works out. Mando also has a few passengers in his day, such as the Penguins and Green Goblin, who is assumed didn't last long. The Penguins also tied along with a Bad Batch for a while. We then learn Starkiller Base is being created and tested and destroys the planet of Swallow Falls. Nothing else is addressed about this. Now, with all the main pieces of lore in place, we get to the finale. But before we do that, there's a channel called Shrek Reacts, who Frozone recruits Shrek to help them fight Macho. Now, for the finale. In Mach Ultimo, we find out that Mr. Incredible is captured by Macho after he discovered Order 66 plans too late. He then tells Mr. Incredible he's going to launch a rocket containing an Omni-Droid into the city, and Mr. Incredible begs him to stop, to which Macho activates the rocket, almost killing Indiana Jones in the process. After Macho leaves the city, Yoda comes by and releases Mr. Incredible. Meanwhile, Poe, who is all grown up, Shrek, Frozone, Obi-Wan, Grug, Gru, Yoda, Indiana Jones, Elastigirl, and the Avengers are coming up with a plan to stop Macho. That's when Mr. Incredible arrives, putting a full plan in session. All of them arrive at the city in a beat-up van. Now the final battle commences. Grug gets shot, Mr. Incredible is swung to a building, Captain America falls on a shield, and that's when Grug throws a sewer lid at the bot and that is taking out his gun. It's also shown Macho still has his chicken despite it being a chicken nugget earlier. Perhaps he uses his power to resurrect him, or it's most likely another chicken. Meanwhile, Grug is trying to punch Macho, to which leads him to being crushed by the big droid. Thor then throws his hammer through the droid, killing it. But that only got Macho into phase 2, to where he drinks a serum, making him a huge purple monster, to Shrek's horror. Frozone freezes his hands, followed by Thor electrocuting him and ending with Indiana Jones shooting him dead. However, there's a phase 3 because Macho faked his death. He repels Thor's hammer with his beefy belly, knocking out both Cap and Mr. Incredible again, takes a lightsaber to the neck and knocks out Obi-Wan and thinks he won. They have one last card to play, which is Poe Whooshy Finger holds himself while holding Macho to get both of them to the spirit realm. Gru then tells him not to do it, but Poe, it's not Winnie the Pooh, but Poe skadooshes himself and sends himself, the chicken, and Macho out of this world. Our final shot is Shrek crying over this loss, Obi-Wan telling him, "May the Force be with you," and a Doctor Strange portal opening up to the Jade Palace, assuming that someone's trying to resurrect Poe or El Macho. Perhaps it's going to be like Kung Fu Panda 3, where they have Poe filled with chi and they have him kill El Macho. And that's the Macho cinematic universe. Also, I know about Vector. Like, Vector appears in almost every single video, or he cameos in quite a few videos. But it's mainly like I don't want to cover that right now. But if you want a short answer, it's probably because he's probably just a figment of their imagination or something. I have no idea, but I'm done. Someone else can theorize this channel. This just pushed me to the limit. Not only am I late recording this, but I just cannot. I can't do this. I can't do this. Thank you, Fancy Turkey. You made me go completely insane. Alright, I'm done. Alright. See you guys. I need to take my dog for a walk anyway.